Chapter 13 Turn Back to God. About this same time, Jesus was told that Pilate had given orders for some people from Galilee to be killed while they were offering sacrifices. Jesus replied, "Do you think that these people were worse sinners than everyone else in Galilee just because of what happened to them? Not at all. But you can be sure that if you don't turn back to God, every one of you will also be killed. What about those 18 people who died when the tower in Siloam fell on them? Do you think they were worse than everyone else in Jerusalem? Not at all. But you can be sure that if you don't turn back to God, every one of you will also die." A story about a fig tree. Jesus then told them this story. A man had a fig tree growing in his vineyard. One day he went out to pick some figs, but he didn't find any. So he said to the gardener, "For 3 years I have come looking for figs on this tree, and I haven't found any yet. Chop it down. Why should it take up space?" The gardener answered, "Master, leave it for another year. I'll dig around it and put some manure on it to make it grow. Perhaps it will have figs on it next year. If it doesn't, you can have it cut down." Healing a woman on the Sabbath. One Sabbath, Jesus was teaching in a Jewish meeting place, and a woman was there who had been crippled by an evil spirit for 18 years. She was completely bent over and could not straighten up. When Jesus saw the woman, he called her over and said, "You are now well." He placed his hands on her, and at once she stood up straight and praised God. The man in charge of the meeting place was angry because Jesus had healed someone on the Sabbath. So he said to the people, "Each week has 6 days when we can work. Come and be healed on one of those days, but not on the Sabbath." The Lord replied, "Are you trying to fool someone? Won't any one of you untie your ox or donkey and lead it out to drink on a Sabbath? This woman belongs to the family of Abraham, but Satan has kept her bound for 18 years. Isn't it right to set her free on the Sabbath?" Jesus' words made his enemies ashamed, but everyone else in the crowd was happy about the wonderful things he was doing. A mustard seed and yeast. This is also told in Matthew 13:31-33, Mark 4:30-32. Jesus said, "What is God's kingdom like? What can I compare it with? It is like what happens when someone plants a mustard seed in a garden. The seed grows as big as a tree, and birds nest in its branches." Then Jesus said, "What can I compare God's kingdom with? It is like what happens when a woman mixes yeast into 3 batches of flour. Finally, all the dough rises, the narrow door." This is also told in Matthew 7:13-14, 21-23. As Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem, he taught the people in the towns and villages. Someone asked him, "Lord, are only a few people going to be saved?" Jesus answered, "To all you can to go in by the narrow door. A lot of people will try to get in, but will not be able to. Once the owner of the house gets up and locks the door, you will be left standing outside. You will knock on the door and say, 'Sir, open the door for us.' But the owner will answer, 'I don't know a thing about you.' Then you will start saying, 'We dined with you and you taught in our streets.' But he will say, 'I really don't know who you are. Get away from me, you evil people.' Then when you have been thrown outside, you will weep and grit your teeth, because you will see Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and all the prophets in God's kingdom. People will come from all directions and sit down to feast in God's kingdom. There, the ones who are now least important will be the most important, and those who are now most important will be least important." Jesus and Herod. At that time, some Pharisees came to Jesus and said, "You had better get away from here. Herod wants to kill you." Jesus said to them, "Go and tell that fox, I am going to force out demons and heal people today and tomorrow, and 3 days later I'll have finished." but I am going on my way today and tomorrow and the next day. After all, Jerusalem is the place where prophets are killed. Jesus loves Jerusalem. This is also told in Matthew 23:37-39. Jesus continued, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, your people have killed the prophets and have stoned the messengers who were sent to you. I have often wanted to gather your people as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you wouldn't let me. Now your temple will be deserted. You won't see me again until the time when you say, Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Chapter 14. Jesus heals a sick man. One Sabbath, Jesus was having dinner in the home of an important Pharisee, and everyone was carefully watching Jesus. All of a sudden, a man with swollen legs stood up in front of him. Jesus turned and asked the Pharisees and the teachers of the law of Moses, Is it right to heal on the Sabbath? But they did not say a word. Jesus took hold of the man, then he healed him and sent him away. Afterwards, Jesus asked the people, If your son or ox falls into a well, wouldn't you pull him out straight away, even on the Sabbath? There was nothing they could say. How to be a guest. Jesus saw how the guests had tried to take the best seats. So he told them, When you are invited to a wedding feast, don't sit in the best place. Someone more important may have been invited. Then the one who invited you will come and say, Give your place to this other guest. You will be embarrassed and will have to sit in the worst place. When you are invited to be a guest, so go and sit in the worst place, then the one who invited you may come and say, My friend, take a better seat. You will then be honored in front of all the other guests. If you put yourself above others, you will be put down. But if you humble yourself, you will be honored. Then Jesus said to the man who had invited him, When you give a dinner or a banquet, don't invite your friends and family and relatives and rich neighbors. If you do, they will invite you in return, and you will be paid back. When you give a feast, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind. They cannot pay you back, but God will bless you and reward you when his people rise from death. The great banquet. This is also told in Matthew 22:1-10. After Jesus had finished speaking, one of the guests said, The greatest blessing of all is to be at the banquet in God's kingdom. Jesus told him, A man once gave a great banquet and invited a lot of guests. When the banquet was ready, he sent a servant to tell the guests, Everything is ready, please come. One guest after another started making excuses. The first one said, I bought some land and I've got to look it over. Please excuse me. Another guest said, I bought 5 teams of oxen and I need to try them out. Please excuse me. Still another guest said, I have just got married and I can't be there. The servant told his master what happened, and the master became so angry that he said, Go as fast as you can to every street and alley in town. Bring in everyone who is poor or crippled or blind or lame. When the servant returned, he said, Master, I've done what you told me, and there is still plenty of room for more people. His master then told him, Go out along the back roads and lanes and make people come in, so that my house will be full. Not one of the guests I first invited will get even a bite of my food, being a disciple. This is also told in Matthew 10:37-38. Large crowds were walking along with Jesus when he returned and said, You cannot be my disciple unless you love me more than you love your father and mother, your wife and children, and your brothers and sisters. You cannot come with me unless you love me more than you love your own life. You cannot be my disciple unless you carry your own cross and come with me. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. What is the first thing you will do? Won't you sit down and figure out how much it will cost and if you have enough money to pay for it? Otherwise, you will start building the tower but not be able to finish. Then everyone who sees what is happening will laugh at you. They will say, "You started building but could not finish the job." What will a king do if he has only 10,000 soldiers to defend himself against a king who is about to attack him with 20,000 soldiers? Before he goes out to battle, won't he first sit down and decide if he can win? If he thinks he won't be able to defend himself, he will send messengers and ask for peace while the other king is still a long way off. So then you cannot be my disciple unless you give away everything you own. Third, this is also told in Matthew 5:13, Mark 9:15. Jesus continued, "Salt is good, but if it no longer tastes like salt, how can it be made to taste salty again? It is no longer good for the soil or even for the manure pile. People simply throw it out. If you have ears, pay attention." Chapter 15, One sheep. This is also told in Matthew 18:12-14. Tax collectors and sinners were all crowding around to listen to Jesus. So the Pharisees and the teachers of the law of Moses started grumbling. "This man is friendly with the sinners. He even eats with them." Then Jesus told them this story. "If any of you has 100 sheep and one of them gets lost, what will you do? Won't you leave the 99 in the field and go and look for the lost sheep until you find it? And when you find it, you will be so glad that you will put it on your shoulder and carry it home. Then you will call in your friends and neighbors and say, 'Let's celebrate, I've found my lost sheep.'" Jesus said, "In the same way, there is more happiness in heaven because of one sinner who turns to God than over 99 good people who don't need to." One coin. Jesus told the people another story. What will a woman do if she has 10 silver coins and loses one of them? Won't she light a lamp, sweep the floor, and look carefully until she finds it? Then she will call in her friends and neighbors and say, "Let's celebrate. I found the coin I lost." Jesus said, "In the same way, God's angels are happy when even one person turns to Him." Two sons. Jesus also told them another story. Once a man had two sons. The younger son said to his father, "Give me my share of the property." So the father divided his property between his two sons. Not long after that, the younger son packed up everything he owned and left for a foreign country, where he wasted all his money in wild living. He had spent everything when a bad famine spread through that whole land. Soon he had nothing to eat. He went to work for a man in that country, and the man sent him out to take care of his pigs. He would have been glad to eat what the pigs were eating, but no one gave him a thing. Finally he came to his senses and said, "My father's workers have plenty to eat, and here I am starving to death. I will go to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against God in heaven and against you. I am no longer good enough to be called your son. Treat me like one of your workers.'" The younger son got up and started back to his father, but when he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt sorry for him. He ran to his son and hugged and kissed him. The son said, "Father, I have sinned against God in heaven and against you. I am no longer good enough to be called your son." But his father said to the servants, "Hurry and bring the best clothes and put them on him. Give him a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet. Get the best calf and prepare it so we can eat and celebrate. This son of mine was dead, but has now come back to life. He was lost and has now been found." And they began to celebrate. The elder son had been out in the field, but when he came near the house, he heard the music and dancing. So he called one of the servants over and asked, "What's going on here?" The servant answered, "Your brother has come home safe and sound, and your father ordered us to kill the best calf." The elder brother got so angry that he would not even go into the house. His father came out and begged him to go in, but he said to his father, "For years I have worked for you like a slave and have always obeyed you. But you have never even given me a little goat so that I could give a dinner for my friends. This other son of yours wasted your money on prostitutes. And now that he has come home, you ordered the best calf to be killed for a feast. His father replied, My son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we should be glad and celebrate. Your brother was dead, but he is now alive. He was lost and has now been found. Chapter 16. A dishonest manager. Jesus said to his disciples, A rich man once had a manager to take care of his business. But he was told that his manager was wasting money, so the rich man called him in and said, What is this I hear about you? Tell me what you have done. You are no longer going to work for me. The manager said to himself, What shall I do now that my master is going to fire me? I can't dig ditches and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do so that people will welcome me into their homes after I've lost my job. Then one by one he called in the people who were in debt to his master. He asked the first one, How much do you owe my master? 100 barrels of olive oil, the man answered. So the manager said, Take your bill and sit down and quick write 50. The manager asked someone else who was in debt to his master, How much do you owe? 1,000 sacks of wheat, the man replied. The manager said, Take your bill and write 800. The master praised his dishonest manager for looking out for himself so well. That's how it is. The people of his world look out for themselves better than the people who belong to the light. My disciples, I tell you to use wicked wealth to make friends for yourselves. Then, when it is gone, you will be welcomed into an eternal home. Anyone who can be trusted in little matters can also be trusted in important matters. But anyone who is dishonest in little matters will be dishonest in important matters. If you cannot be trusted with this wicked wealth, who will trust you with true wealth? And if you cannot be trusted with what belongs to someone else, who will give you something that will be your own? You cannot be the slave of two masters. You will like one more than the other, or be more loyal to one than to the other. You cannot serve God and money.